We wave to say hello. We wave to say hello. To all our friends at story time, we wave to say hello. We clap to say hello. We clap to say hello. To all our friends at story time, we clap to say hello. We whisper to say hello. We whisper to say hello. To all our friends at story time, we whisper to say hello. Hi y'all, my name's Haley and I'm a children's librarian with the New Orleans Public Library. Today, I have a short story time for you about a little animal. Let's see if you can guess what animal story time will be about today. I'll give you 3 clues. This animal is green, it eats bugs, and it says, ribbit! Did you guess a frog? You would be exactly right. Today's story time is about the animal frog. Can you spell this word with me? F-R-O-G. F-R-O-G spells frog. But did you know the frog is not always a frog? Frogs start off as teeny tiny eggs. And when the eggs hatch, they become something called a tadpole. Looks kind of like this. The next stage in the frog's life cycle, is when the tadpole grows legs. The next step looks a lot like a frog, but it still has a tail. So the final step in the frog's life cycle is when it drops its tail. That looks more like the frogs we know. So that is the life cycle of a frog. The story that I'm going to read today, with permission of the publishing company Simon & Schuster, thanks y'all, is called The Biggest Frog in Australia. And this is based off an Australian myth, a folklore myth. So it's The Biggest Frog in Australia by Susan Roth. Once in the dream time, the biggest frog in Australia woke up very thirsty. He was so thirsty that he drank up all the water in all the puddles, and then he drank up all the water in all the billabongs. Next, he drank up all the water in all the rivers and in all the lakes. But even after all that drinking, he was still thirsty. The biggest frog in Australia was so thirsty that he drank up all the water in the ocean. He jumped into the sky and drank up all the water in the rain clouds. And then, finally, the biggest frog wasn't thirsty anymore. He sat in the outback, bloated, full to his eyeballs with all the water in Australia. Well, this was just fine for the biggest frog, but the earth became dusty. Eucalyptus trees shriveled, wallaby grasses bent over, flowering wattles dropped their petals, and then all the rest of the animals were thirsty because the biggest frog had left them nothing to drink. One day, old Wombat spoke to his friends in a parched voice. If we could make the frog laugh, the water would spill out of his mouth and go back to where it belongs. I'll start, screeched Kookaburra. I've got a good one. Where does the saltwater crocodile lie down when he's tired? Anywhere he wants, ha 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 ha. Kookaburra was laughing so hard at her own joke that she could barely get the words out of her mouth. Ha 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 ha, cackled all the other animals, but the biggest frog in Australia didn't even smile. He was too busy thinking about how he wasn't thirsty anymore. Next was Kangaroo. First he jumped backward over Platypus, then he jumped backward over Dingo, but he jumped too far and landed upside down in a tree. All the animals chuckled and clapped, except the biggest frog in Australia. He looked as though he were asleep with his eyes open. When it was Koala's turn, he waddled up and down on 2 legs, sticking his belly out as far as it would go. You look ridiculous, bellowed Enchinita. Koala turned and waddled in the other direction. He started to wiggle and shake his bottom. Oh, the animals stomped their feet and they shouted with laughter. They were having such a good time that they almost forgot they were thirsty. But the biggest frog in Australia didn't even blink. Only Wombat remembered how thirsty he was. He was furious at the biggest frog. "Let's tickle him," he shouted angrily. But just then, the animals noticed that the frog had begun to move his head. He was watching two eels who were half crazed from being out of the water for so long. They were dancing, slowly at first, but then faster and faster. They twisted their bodies into the silliest shapes. Before long, the eels had tied themselves into a slip knot. When they tried to move, the knot only became tighter. They pulled and pulled and pulled, and finally slipped apart with such force that they rolled up like a spring and landed on either side of the biggest frog. By now, the animals were too thirsty to even smile. But there was a flicker in the eyes of the biggest frog in Australia. The frog let out a soft giggle and another. He snorted and a little water squirted out of the side of his mouth. Encouraged, the eels then stood on their heads and wrote their names in cursive. At that, the biggest frog in Australia opened his mouth and guffawed. The other animals jumped up and ran for their lives. They scattered as fast as they could in every direction as the biggest frog in Australia laughed out all the water. He laughed the water back to the clouds in the sky and back to the bottom of the ocean, into the lakes and the rivers, the billabongs and the puddles. And once the animals were safe on high ground, they laughed along with him. "Oh my," croaked the biggest frog in Australia. "Eels are so silly." And just remembering them made him laugh all over again. The end. Thanks for reading along with me. Next, I have a little song about frogs. So if you know this one, or if you start to catch on, please sing along with me. It's okay if you maybe don't have the best voice. Parents, I know I can be a little embarrassed about my singing voice, but singing to your child can actually help them with speaking skills and also later on with reading, because when you're singing a song, it helps to break down the smaller parts of words. So it's really important, and it can be lots of fun. This is called 5 Little Speckled Frogs. Let's make sure we've got all the frogs here. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, here we go. 5 little speckled frogs sitting on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. One hopped into the pool where it was nice and cool. Now there are 4 green speckled frogs. Glub, glub. 4 little speckled frogs sitting on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. One hopped into the pool where it was nice and cool. Now there are 3 green speckled frogs. Glub, glub. 3 little speckled frogs sitting on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. One hopped into the pool where it was nice and cool. Now there are 2 green speckled frogs. 2 little speckled frogs sitting on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. One hopped into the pool where it was nice and cool. Now there's just 1 green speckled frog. Glub, glub. 1 little speckled frog sitting on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. He jumped into the pool where it is nice and cool. Now there are no green speckled frogs. The end. Thank you so much for singing along with me today. If you want to look up some more picture books about frogs at home with your family, I suggest Tumble Books. It's a resource you can access under databases on the New Orleans Public Library's website. So that's nolalibrary.org. Under databases, find Tumble Books, and there's hundreds of picture books that you can access from your phone, tablet, or computer to read at home. And of course, you can use the contactless pickup service at your local branch to check out any physical copies of books you're interested in. So thank you so much for joining me in Storytime. I'd love for you to join me now in the goodbye song. We're gonna do it backwards this time. We whisper to say goodbye. We whisper to say goodbye to all our friends at Storytime. We whisper to say goodbye. We clap to say goodbye. We clap to say goodbye to all our friends at Storytime. We clap to say goodbye. We wave to say goodbye. We wave to say goodbye to all our friends at Storytime. We wave to say goodbye. Bye, y'all.